noon by my count on my clock, so let's get started. My name is Jennifer Thompson. I'm with HawkSoft User Group, and today's topic is tips and tricks for the QuickBooks desktop version. So we did this webinar back in December, but we were doing it for the online version, and we had a lot of people who said, but I have the desktop version. And so there's enough differences between the two products, online and the desktop version, that it wasn't really applicable for them to stay on necessarily. Some did anyway, but we decided to hold a second webinar today going through the same types of information on the desktop version. And if for some reason you have the QuickBooks online version, I would suggest that you go out to our website and view the link for the recorded webinar that goes through the online version. And I'm going to post that in the chat screen in just a couple minutes when I'm done talking. I'll put a link out there for you guys. If we can just go to the next slide then. As you've all probably figured out, you are all muted by default. We have 70 people on right now, and it'd be kind of hard to manage that sound sometimes with the background and everything. So how we'd like to handle the question and answer is if you have a question, you have two options. You can either use a button that says raise hand. There's a little blue button that says raise hand, and when you click on that, we'll be looking for that, and periodically we'll stop and I will click a button to unmute you. So something will pop up and say, Jennifer's trying to unmute you. Do you want to allow that? And you have to say yes. And then we will call on you and say, why don't you ask your question out loud? If you don't feel comfortable doing that, then we suggest you use the Q&A. So make sure that you go down to your toolbar at the bottom of the RingCentral screen and click on the Q&A button. And that's where we want you to put your questions. That really allows us to manage the questions so we know who we answered and whether we're going to ask the question out loud. So if you just pop your questions into the chat screen, that's just like a real long dialog box, and it's very easy for us to miss something. So the Q&A just allows us to manage that much better. So if you could use that feature, and if you could, as I already mentioned, if you're having any difficulty with the audio, we suggest you call in. I have put the phone number along with our meeting ID into the chat screen. And if at any point you have some sort of technical difficulties, or if you just have to step away because a customer comes in, please feel free to do that. We are recording the webinar, and we will email out a link to the recorded webinar, usually within 24 hours of the actual presentation. And if you can go to my next slide. Most people, I think, know that it is a, that
actually,
Hug is a separate. Oops,
Jennifer, one more, I'm sorry.
Yeah,
the screen share's off again.
It is it? Hang on. I'm sorry.
It's okay. RingCentral thinks it's Friday. It is okay.
Is it there?
Nope.
Nope. There we go. It's starting to share again.
There we go.
There we go. HawkSoft User Group is a separate organization from HawkSoft, although we work with HawkSoft, very integrated. And a lot of times we have users who are doing presentations. And our goal really is to help educate people so that they know how to use their software to the best of the ability of the software and to your abilities. We don't always teach what we call best practices simply because what works for one agency may not work for another, and so we're here to share practices that are working for people in their situations and for you to take that away and apply what you can to your own agency. And today we are really lucky because we have some experts with us from HawkSoft. We've got Debby Neff, who's going to be doing the presentation, and then we also have Crystal Erlitz, who will be assisting us with responding to Q&A. And Debby, I'm going to turn it over to you so you can introduce yourself.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Well, I promise that I'm a little bit more knowledgeable about the accounting programs than I am apparently the slide presentations. So, but I have been with HawkSoft for just over 8 years now. I started out in the product support team and moved over into the implementation. So I probably know many of you from implementation. I worked with them as a senior accounting consultant for over 8 years, and just recently in September moved over to the managed accounting service team. So I have a lot of experience with HawkSoft accounting and with the integration between HawkSoft and QuickBooks. So I am thrilled to share what we have and see how we can implement and help you. So let's jump in. I've got a couple monthly punch list to do items listed here before we look at the actual program, but I wanted to just give you kind of some good things to get in the habit of doing each month. I tend to do these, mostly we do them when we're doing the end of the month, we're reconciling our bank statements. It's just kind of a good reminder to do this on a monthly basis, and that's to ensure, obviously, all necessary items are exported from HawkSoft to QuickBooks, so that we can ensure that everything we need for the month to reconcile has been exported. You want to confirm your receivables and payables match between HawkSoft and QuickBooks. We'll talk a little bit about that. I'll show you how that is a good practice to get into to stay on top of those things that you may not match up, maybe that you've exported things inadvertently, and just helps you clean everything so each month you're starting out with a clean slate. Reconciling all bank accounts, that includes your bank accounts, your credit cards, and other assets and liabilities. And then running your financial report. So in our last session with the QuickBooks Online, we talked about creating some bundles, and so we'll talk about how you do that with QuickBooks Desktop. And then, of course, running any reports that you need for your accountant, the trial balance, sub-ledger details, etc. So just kind of some to-dos that are kind of a good thing to get in the habit of doing. The very first thing, can you see my HawkSoft? I just want to make sure we're managing. Okay, good. So first off, in HawkSoft, if you are not utilizing the integration from HawkSoft to QuickBooks, I highly encourage you to do that. Everything you implement and you put into HawkSoft, it becomes exported over to QuickBooks, and it creates those transactions that you need in QuickBooks to become your banking transactions, to say. So anything that's hitting your trust account, I highly recommend that you utilize HawkSoft integration with QuickBooks. That is set up in your settings under your trust accounting. On the very last tab within the trust accounting, you have your QuickBooks integration, and this is where you are going to integrate your transactions. So you can, depending on your integration, is set up in your settings. So you can see we have the integration type here. If you have QuickBooks and HawkSoft located on the same computer or server, you have a direct integration. If you have HawkSoft and QuickBooks in different locations, so for example, you're using HawkSoft with Cotter or with a remote user, you have it in a different location than on your computer and desktop, and you're using most likely an IIF file for your QuickBooks desktop. So that means that the data is coming from HawkSoft going into a folder, and we take that information from that folder and pull it into QuickBooks. So it's kind of a little holding point. So those are usually the options on your two integrations when you're talking about HawkSoft, between HawkSoft and QuickBooks integration. Okay, so we want to be sure you have that set up, and then of course your integration, you can set that up to go through and set that up. Again, huge advantage because it just takes out that manual entry for you and allows for HawkSoft to create the transactions that you want in QuickBooks. In HawkSoft, we have a couple reports that you should be utilizing for balancing between HawkSoft and QuickBooks, and we'll talk about that. All your accounting reports are up here in your accounting menu. You have your trust accounting, which is ultimately the receipt book where all your data is being written for accounting, and that's the report we utilize to export from HawkSoft to QuickBooks. Your customer accounts receivables report, which I'm sure you all are familiar with. Let me see if it's going to scooch over there. Okay, customer balance summary report. Let me run that in my other screen and I'll bring it over. The customer balance summary report is a report that can be used to show what customers have open balances, including credits on their account. This is a great report to stay on top of those. And again, I talk about doing them on a monthly basis with your reconciliation, so that just helps you stay on task. These are, for example, anybody who has those balances, and that should be matching your balances in QuickBooks. So in QuickBooks, under your Customer Center, you have the feature of being able to change this to your customers with open balances. When you're looking at this clearly, it's a lot smaller list than what we had in QuickBooks. So that's my first big red light that there's a problem. And it could be that maybe I haven't exported everything over from HawkSoft to QuickBooks. Maybe I cleaned stuff out of QuickBooks and I didn't clean them out of HawkSoft, or vice versa. So this is a great check and balance for you to get in the habit of doing to help you clean out those transactions. And to clean out transactions or to pair them, obviously if you have something in HawkSoft that isn't in QuickBooks, you would export it. If you have too many items in HawkSoft, clean them out. If you need to clean things up in QuickBooks, the best way to do that is to right-click on that customer, go down to Use Register, and this creates the register for that customer. And you can just right-click and delete things out of the client file. So be careful, because it's really easy to delete things. You can run an audit report to see what you've deleted, but I tell people it's easier to avoid things out of QuickBooks than it is to figure it out half the time. So just be careful, because it can get away from you. Make sure you really want to avoid it. Did you have a question?
Debbie, yeah, we had somebody who had asked, how did you get to this screen? She missed it. And it was the screen, I think, before this where you were showing how things weren't, what things were maybe missing or overstated on the QuickBooks side.
Was it on QuickBooks side or HawkSoft side? QuickBooks, we think? Okay.
I was in QuickBooks, customer.
QuickBooks.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, so in QuickBooks, we're in the Customer Center, and I use the shortcut menus on the left, but you can also get there to the top of the menu where it says Customer and Customer Center. So you have your customers here. I am filtering it by customers with open balances, so you can see you have that little menu here. And then when you're looking at each of the customers, you have the view screen here to the right. But to get into the file and be able to edit and view all the transactions, I will right-click and use Register at the very bottom of the screen. It's about the fourth item up from the bottom of the menu. Okay, so that's where we're into. This is, I call it the checkbook for the customer. So you can kind of see the in and out of each of the transactions for the customer. Okay, so again, this is a really good thing to help clean up those balances. The other report we want to utilize a lot is the HawkSoft is the payables report. So when you are paying your company payables, if you run your agency on a per statement basis, you will have your company payables and your unpaid company payables report. So I will typically run my payables for all my carriers, and I want to see them and see what I have open. And this is a great thing to do for several reasons. One, to make sure that you are staying on top of your payables, but also making sure, because there's many times we'll create invoices throughout the day and forget to and send them over to QuickBooks. So one of the things we're going to look at too is how do we reconcile those and match them up. But I will run this payable report, summarize the report, and go into item. An item in this case is your carriers. And this gives you a summary of what you have open. So again, you take that list and you go over to QuickBooks, and in your chart of accounts, I just go to the chart of accounts in the little menu screen here, and you can scroll down to your chart of accounts and see that you have your list of carriers here. So you have your payables and you have the balances that are open. And again, in HawkSoft, you would just compare that to this list to see what do you have open in HawkSoft that is currently not matching up in QuickBooks. So again, this can be related to the fact that you have too many items and you might have deleted something in HawkSoft and you didn't delete it in QuickBooks. Or maybe you didn't send over the invoices, because you'll see maybe there's a credit in one of these payables that would tell you that you sent the check over, but you didn't send the invoices over. So this, again, is just kind of one of those check and balances to really help you make sure that you're staying on top of what's due and what's where. So one of the things also when you pay your company payables, it's a good habit to get into is to reconcile them. So when you send over a check and your invoices to QuickBooks to produce that check for the invoices, you want to come in here and you can just right-click on these in any one of the line items and go down to Reconcile. And what we will do is always reconcile to the current date and to zero balance. And that is just because that gives you a reset, knowing that every time you're reconciling, you're just resetting it to 0, okay? So when you run it, you can see that if you had a check over here, you would have a check that offsets that invoice, and you're just clearing them and matching them up. This just helps you, again, tighten that up and let you know what payables you've paid. The other thing, when you're viewing in here, then you'll be able to see anything that's been reconciled with an R in the column here with the check mark. You're able to view it by cleared item. So down at the very bottom, you have a sort by window, and you can do that by cleared status. And that status will move everything that's been paid or not paid up to the top so that you have that right there and you can compare it to HawkSoft and QuickBooks. Okay, so just some little tips there. I know that a lot of times those payables can get away from us, so this is a great way to kind of check and balance and stay on top of those before they get crazy. Also in QuickBooks, for your QuickBooks Desktop, you still have the ability to sync your bank account. So if you're not doing that for operating payroll, this is a great feature to do so. We don't necessarily recommend doing your trust because then you have run the possibility of some double entries. And by not matching and adding things, now all of a sudden you send them over from HawkSoft, you have dual entries. So we really lean on it a lot for the operating and credit cards. So if you have the bank feed feature here, you can come in and you can set this up. I'm just going to skip through the windows. And what it'll do is give you the opportunity to, while it dances, because it has to close everything in between, it gives you the opportunity to search for your bank and set that up. Now, warning, you want to be sure that you don't bring everything and everything from the day you opened your bank account over. Just be very selective in deciding what you want to bring over. But you can sync your bank if the bank has that feature. So that is a good help and time saver for you. As far as reports in QuickBooks, and I'm going to just close up some of these windows. You have the ability to bundle up and customize reports. In your report feature up at the top, if you come down to company and financials, for example, and you have a profit and loss detail report, as you are probably familiar, you can always sort through your reports at the top by date range, by fiscal year, last month, last year, etc. You have the ability to customize these reports by clicking on the Customize report at the top. This will allow you to add different columns to your report if you would like to. You can put it in ascending, descending order. You can add any of these columns to it. You can also change up filters and header and footer information. So if you want to start to make it a little more pretty, this just allows you to kind of make it your own. Okay, so you can build these customized reports. When you are done building your customized reports, you can also create them, create a memorization. So you're able to memorize the report so that it runs that same format each time you run it. Save it. Also, you can save it in a group. So if you want to start to build your accountant reports, you can add them into a memorized group. You can choose if, you know, there tend to be your accountant or your company's reports. So you can build those reports so that all you have to do is come in and run that line item for reports for accountant, and it'll run all those reports that you need for that bundle. Okay. Any questions? Did we have any questions pop up on that?
The only question we have so far, Debbie, if you don't mind, one of the questions was how do we apply or clean up zero balances when, you know, because the payment comes through and it doesn't apply to a journal entry. Can you show us in desktop how you apply the payments to the journal entries at the customer level?
Oh, sure. So if we're in the customer center, and I don't know if I have one of those, but we'll look. Let's see what we've got. Well, let's see. If we open up this client, oops, sorry. Let's go into our register and see. So with that, what happens is when you're receiving payments in HawkSoft, they don't necessarily know to apply that payment to the invoice. So if you had, and this is probably a bad example because it doesn't have it, but what you can do is if you had a payment coming in, you can open the payment, maybe. And it gives you the ability to apply these payments within here. So you can auto apply the payment up here, and or if there was an invoice, you could select it and apply it. So it's very similar in a sense with the QuickBooks Online where you're just telling it where to go to match it up. Hope that helps. It's hard without an actual situation.
Yep, it did. And so I answered that. I answered it in the chat, but one of the other things to just as a reminder, to make sure that payments that are unapplied do not show up on your P&L. Make sure you're running your reports, your P&L on an accrual basis, even if you are a cash basis customer.
Yeah.
So yeah, it just little caveat. That's true for desktop and online both. Just run your reports on an accrual basis.
Right, and it's just, and it actually is just something with the integration between HawkSoft and QuickBooks, because HawkSoft, they don't know how to, QuickBooks isn't recognizing a journal entry. So when a journal entry is your invoices or your credit memos, QuickBooks is kind of like, what do I do with this? So it just stays unapplied. But like Crystal said, the way to kind of skate over that is just you run it on accrual. Okay. While we're in here, this is a great place to look. We had some questions last time about how to attach files or bank statements and things like that. You'll notice that anywhere you can attach a file, there will be a paperclip at the top. So you can browse and attach your statements. You can attach your receipts, your bills, anything like that. So anywhere you see the paperclip, that'll import it into the document you're working on, whether it be a check, a statement, etc. We also have the ability, just like it is to do your bill paying. So you have the ability to set up bill pays. If you want to, if you have that set up with your bank, you can enter a bill. And one of the things you can do with the bill is you can make it a reoccurring item. So if you have a monthly bill that, like for your rent or your utilities, that tends to be the same every single month, phone is another big one, you can create that bill and at the very top do the memorize. When you do the memorize, it'll, oops, I'm going to click on it. It'll give you the options to be able to name it. So maybe it's just AT&T, maybe it's utilities. You're able to tell it, do you want a reminder? So what happens is every time you open your QuickBooks, it'll pop up a reminder that you have these bills pending. You can tell it how often, the next day it's due. When you start to set these things up as, like, for example, an automatic transaction, you can, if it's one that you're paying off a loan or something, you can put in a number of remaining items, when it's due. And when you create that again, it'll come up as a transaction that reminds you of it. You also have the clock up in the right-hand corner that will remind you of anything you have sitting in here to be processed. So that's kind of another little feature I know that came up in one of the questions we had.
And one real quick note, and I don't know if it's kind of across the board, but one of the issues I've had when I have desktop customers is when I open desktop and just don't pay attention, and those memorized transactions have popped up, and I do not acknowledge them and close it out. When I try to integrate between HawkSoft and QuickBooks Desktop, sometimes those items will not go over. So just, you know, if you're having issues, it's kind of one of the first things you can troubleshoot is if you do have those that box that has popped up, just close it out. You don't have to take any action on it. It will open up the next time you go in, but just close the dialog box and all should be well.
Good point. Good point. Good troubleshooting. All right. Did we have any other questions? I'm trying to think if I didn't cover anything. I feel like I went really fast. So if there's anything we want to review, any other particular questions that we have that we didn't cover, please chat us so we can address those. I was using the format that we used in the QuickBooks Online version, and some of the questions that came up from the desktop users. One of the things, and I don't know, this may be a plug, so I apologize, but one of the things I do want to let you know is that evaluate why you're not using the online version. Why you prefer to use the desktop version versus the online version. I know that when the online version first came out, there was a little bit bad rap, but Intuit has spent a lot of development time and resources into developing the online version versus the desktop. They're eventually going to suspend all support for the desktop. So it's one of those things we're kind of looking at as everybody goes into the cloud more and more, the desktop version versus the online version. The online version gives you ability to have access to all the updates automatically. You're able to access your online version anywhere. So whether you're at home, you can access it from your phone, any mobile device. So it's kind of a nice little feature to be able to have. Again, everything from HawkSoft will integrate with QuickBooks online, no problem there. And we do offer a wholesale discount if you purchase your QuickBooks through our team at HawkSoft. So, and it goes with your monthly billing with the rest of your HawkSoft bill.
And we've had a couple questions come in on both sides about, you know, how easy is it to transition? Do we lose any data? And if you don't mind, Debbie, I'll just handle this one.
Yes, ma'am.
So QuickBooks Desktop, Intuit is actually making it very, very easy to transition over to online. Our team, Crystal Townsend, actually can, in our sales department, she can go through that with you, and she's Debbie's showing you here, there literally is a menu option for this. A couple of the things that will not come over, we don't think that they're deal breakers, but it's something to be aware of, and it may be something that's of concern to you. All your bank reconciliations will not come over, so that first reconciliation that you do for your bank account, credit cards, all of that, it's going to be an all-inclusive bank rec. So that first one's going to be big. Another thing that does not come over is, or where you need to exercise some caution, is if you are running your payroll through QuickBooks Desktop. If you use Intuit Online, that's a totally separate product. But if you are running your payroll through this particular piece of software, there are just some more considerations that we'll have to look at. QuickBooks Online, of course, does offer a payroll product that integrates just like Desktop does, but it's just, again, it's not a deal breaker. It's just something to be aware of. You will have to go through that full setup process. I had something else that was vitally important and then just completely left my head, so I may hop in shortly. Okay, so so we had another question. What are the benefits of online versus desktop? And there are some benefits to desktop. As Debbie mentioned, you know, a lot of us, when we first started down this path, it was all desktop. Online was a big no. But for those that know my particular history, most of you that have had online for a while probably purchased it through my firm for years. And of course, once my firm merged with HawkSoft, it became a HawkSoft wholesale product. But for the past several years, they've been doing quite a few things that have improved the product. However, desktop still has some advantages. One of the biggest advantages, or there's two big ones that come to mind. The first is the cost. You pay one subscription or you pay one payment, and it's, you know, a few $100s. You're not paying for it again until you decide to upgrade. So there's a monthly recurring cost. And of course, with QuickBooks Online, it's a monthly subscription fee. However, you know, we all know that, you know, software is a service. It's just what it is. Most software programs are subscription services now. So that's not as uncommon as it was a few years ago. The second advantage to that is you can have multiple QuickBooks files with one piece of software. So for example, if you're an agency and you have you also have a real estate firm, or you own rental properties, or you know, you have a need to have multiple company files, you can do that with QuickBooks Desktop, and you don't have to pay for the software again. With QuickBooks Online, you will have to have a separate subscription for each company file. So there are definitely some advantages. One of the final ones is some of our agencies, they want to, you have one person that's kind of responsible for all the operating items, but then you have several people that are responsible for trust items. Well, in that case, our final recommendation usually is either you do your trust with QuickBooks Online and either desktop or online for your operating, or you do a separate company file, one for trust, one for operating, and then you give the appropriate permissions and trust. Outside of those, which sounds like a lot, and it is, outside of those, the recommendation really is QuickBooks Online. The functionality is much better. It's easier to use. It's easier to learn. And that's really where they're putting their focus and their efforts on all their research and development.
Awesome. Was there any other questions that came in that we should be addressing?
When you reconcile your bank statements, how do you attach, I'm assuming the statements themselves in QuickBooks. I know you can do it in online, Debbie, if you can just show where you would do that in desktop.
So if we're reconciling, let me see if it's going to let me get in here. Let me just mock it up here. Get an ending balance, maybe a 0. Yeah, this is one of the things that's really nice with online. I feel like I'm selling. is that there is a section that you can just go in and attach, whereas it's a little more hidden and kind of mysterious here. So when you're reconciling your transactions through your reconciliation process here in your window, you'll see there's really no place to attach your reconciliation, right? Or I'm sorry, your bank account or statement, right? So a lot of times in your chart of accounts, you'll see there's just no place either. So this attach area down here at the very bottom, and it's really hard to see. This is kind of the attach center. So I hope you can kind of see that at the bottom. But this is where you can drag and drop attachments. So you can call them, name them, so that you can maybe put them in as a accordingly to your reconciliation for that month or the statement for that month. You have the ability to drag and drop them and obviously scan them in. So this is kind of that correlating attachment center is where you would drop those things that don't have a specific area. Whereas with the receipts and the bill pay and those kind of things, there is that little paper clip at the top. So you can attach that into that. So if you wanted to attach it to the check, have that paper clip and clip that receipt, maybe an e-pay policy or a bill, you can do that in the actual window. Whereas like for the statements and stuff, you want to probably just use this attachment center. Does that help?
Yep. And then Debbie, if you can show, how do you find them after you save the attachments? How do you find them later?
They're gone forever.
No. With my luck, yes.
Yeah, for me, probably. You'll notice. Surprise. No. So you'll notice there's a column over here that says attach. So you can also see if there's anything attached in any one of these GL lines. I'm just going to see. I have to think about it. There should be, if I had an attachment in here, I believe that you can view the details and detach and open them through this attachment window. But you can also view in the GL under your chart of accounts if there is an attachment for that line item.
And it'll show. Yeah, it'll show on the right. It won't be a blank spot like it is now.
Yeah.
So we have 2 questions. The first is, how do you close your books at year end? It is as far as the actual year end process, that is a bit too much for the question. But Debbie, if you can just show real quick how to put in your close date for your books.
Yes. Let's see if that is under. See, I've been using QuickBooks.
We've been using online
often.
I know.
Where's our settings? Let's see, company. sorry, I should have been thinking about that. All right, hang on, people. Let's see.
Oh, set closing date under company. It's set closing date.
Did you see it? Okay.
Yep.
Oh, there it is. So you have the set of passwords, and then you have your setting closing date. See, I'm so lost in minutes. There, thank you. Preferences. All right. So in here, you can set up your different account preferences and set up the closing date. Is it company preferences? And so when you, but caution about setting the closing date. Are you, I think you're still able to, after it's forced closed here, you have to have a password to set the closing date. So you can set up the closing date. This will close out your books. Usually after you're done reconciling for the year, and you can set up that closing date and it'll have a password so that, you know, it kind of locks it down so nobody can just kind of come in and try and avoid things out and things like that.
And I know that with online, you cannot export from HawkSoft over to QuickBooks once with dates that are closed. So that's another caution as well. You'll want to make sure that everything is exported over before you close the books, or you'll have to go in, reopen the books, export, and then reclose. One of the other, so just a couple quick questions to knock out, and then we have a few more. So Cindy, with QuickBooks Online, you have, if you buy Essentials, you have 3 users plus an accountant included in your subscription. If you go up to Plus, you have 5 users plus an accountant that are included in the one price. So one of the other questions, Debbie, and if you will answer this one, the question is that we do not sync with HawkSoft. What is the advantage? If they have very, very little agency bill, what is the advantage of syncing?
So syncing just allows, so right now, even with the handful of transactions that you're receiving, you're doing something with them. So if you're manually putting them in, there's room for error. With HawkSoft, you're documenting it in HawkSoft and exporting it over, so HawkSoft is doing that work for you. It's a huge time saver. And then again, it just allows you to have those check and balances in both places. When you are on the phone with a customer and you want to bind the business, you're able to just pull it up, see exactly what the history is. Everything's in one place. When you're exporting it over to QuickBooks, it gives you that banking transaction information for your reporting, for tracking commissions that you may be retaining for agency bill or fees. So it allows you to run those revenue reports in QuickBooks that you're not necessarily getting in HawkSoft. And again, it's just that whole ability to be able to allow HawkSoft to do that work for you so that you're not manual entering anything into QuickBooks. Does that help?
It does, and I think too, and I'm sure you mentioned it, but I'm sorry, I was reading through the questions and answers. Being able to reconcile the bank account through accounting software, it's a really powerful tool. And again, you can see very quickly if, did a sweep go out without a payment? Just those type things. Or did we say there was a sweep and it never hit? There's a lot of advantage, even if reconciling the bank account was the only advantage.
Sure.
It's a big enough advantage to make it worth it.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
So Debbie, one of our other questions was how do you reconcile the credit card statement? Can you just show how to reconcile something other than the credit card statements?
That I don't have.
Other than the bank statements, yes. Yes.
Yeah. So it's the same as if we were doing the bank account or any of the payables. You can just right click, and that, I have to say, is an advantage that you have on the desktop versus online.
Yes, it is. You
can right click and do just about everything. So if you just come in here, that you have the reconciliation. You also can access it from different points in the program, but you just reconcile. what you're doing is you can move through here so you can have your list. So if I had the trust account, or if I had another bank account, the operating account, or my credit card, you can just come in here, select the account you want to reconcile. You'll have your statement date and then the ending date. You usually have a beginning balance from the prior month if there was a balance and it didn't go to zero. So you're always reconciling, any account, you're always reconciling it back to what the beginning balance was and the ending balance. And if you're doing a good job, you'll have zero discrepancy. So when you reconcile, you're just going to put in whatever that ending balance was and hit continue. And so then you're going to have the payments and credits on the right side and the debits and charges going out of the account on the left side. So as you pay your credit card, for example, you would have a credit card payment and you would have all the transactions on the left side. And you're just matching them up, and then you just reconcile. So hit that big reconcile now button, and that in accounting world is great joy.
It brings a lot of happiness,
especially if that's zero.
Now there is one caveat with the credit cards. It is our best practices within our department that we set up the credit cards as a liability on the chart of accounts. A lot of agents, they go in and they get the credit card statement, and they break out items by, they do a category for meals and gas, and they just do one transaction that has all the breakdown. If that's working for you, it's fine. You just don't get the benefit of the bank sync, number one, but then also being able to reconcile it. And if for whatever reason you are not paying your credit card off every month, then it gets really, really tricky on how you create that expense on your ledger. So for all of our customers, we actually have the credit cards set up as a liability. It's set up as a credit card, and that again gives us that benefit of being able to sync our bank, or to do the bank sync, and then again to reconcile it. And you can do it if you have one master card or one master account and then several credit cards for different employees. You have that option, just like here on your screen. You can see where it says payables, and then you have your child account. You can do the exact same for credit cards too. Let's say you have your main company credit card, and then you have a couple of employees. You can have them set up. So there's a lot of flexibility and advantages of setting up your credit cards on your chart of accounts versus just writing one expense or one check out each month, allocating everything out. All right.
Any other questions?
Well, this is Jennifer, and I'm just going to reiterate, just give people, another opportunity to post a question if they're typing something, and remind them all that we will be sending out a link to the recorded webinar within 24 hours. So if there's anything that you missed or that you feel like you want to go over and see again, you will be able to do that. Or if you had to drop off for some reason and missed a part of it, you'll be able to catch up with it.
Debbie, real quick, can you show where you would find, when we do reconciliation reports in QuickBooks, can you show where you can find the old, history by account, if you will?
So under your reports, we have the list of different accounts, but then let me look at banking. So our banking, you said by previous reconciliations? Is that what you're talking about?
That's exactly what we needed. Yep, that answered the question.
Okay. Okay, good.
Yep.
So that's our report. There is an enormous amount of reports in QuickBooks Desktop, I have to say. And maybe they're available and online too, but I think just because it's such a long list.
Yep. So I think that was actually one of the questions that came up as well. What are the differences as far as the reporting goes? QuickBooks Online 5 years ago was awful at reports. QuickBooks now is very, very different. There, out of, let's say, hypothetically 100 reports, there's maybe 2 that it can't do. But for the most part, all of these reports that you see, you're able to customize those reports in QuickBooks. They're not canned reports like they are here. there are changes where you'll have to, like for example, profit and loss by class code. If you have class tracking turned on, it is absolutely available, and it's a drop-down box. So it looks different. It looks like it's fewer, but all the reports are in there. You just have a different drop-down menu. That's all. So one of the other questions we had, Debbie, and if you don't mind answering this one, is that my chart of accounts doesn't have a payables with company names. Can you just, I'm assuming it's because it's per policy, if you can just talk about those differences real quick. We can't hear you.
Hello?
Oh, yeah. Yes.
Okay. Apparently I was done.
Yep.
So for per policy basis, you won't have a payables, but if you, that is really driven all on the setup in HawkSoft. So HawkSoft under your trust accounting menu options, you have your accounts. And if you have set it up, first off, obviously, in your settings, you're going to have the company payables local checked. That means that we are creating invoices on a per statement basis. And honestly, you can pay them per statement or pay them per invoice. So that means you either are paying every time you get an invoice from the carrier, or you can wait until you get a statement and pay multiple invoices with one check. So that's the difference between per policy and per statement in HawkSoft, and that may be what's dictating and driving what you have and you see in QuickBooks. But the payables account in HawkSoft would be that where you see the payables and then you have the carrier. That's what creates that line item for the parent account and all the sub accounts. We do the same thing with our transfer accounts, which are income and expense accounts in HawkSoft, so we can better track what's going in and out of that trust account for you. So that may be why it looks slightly different in your chart of accounts in QuickBooks. Did that answer the question? I hope.
So Cindy, if you'd like to discuss going to online, reach out. So Debbie, I don't know if my contact information, I know Debbie's is on the last slide. Feel free to contact us. And Cindy, we can also answer the question about the cleanup as well. There's a couple different options for that. So just reach out to Debbie, shoot her an email, and we can get you in contact for the sales side for QBO. And then we can also discuss your options for cleanup and where you can go for that.
They're trickling in.
So what, I don't know, Debbie, if you can see the Q&A either. One of our questions is, can we combine two separate desktop files? One's operating and one's trust. I actually don't know of any good, clean way to do that. Our department recommendation for that would be that you combine them effective like 1/1/21, for example, and use one of your two files. So for example, if you have the most history in operating, then you can, add the trust in starting 1/1/21, or just put in your opening balances and create an entirely new account, a QuickBooks file. There is no clean way to combine the two that ensures that you get all of your data.
Good question. I don't know if I want to tackle that one.
It's well, and the reason I know it doesn't work well is because I've tried several times, and I was very ambitious. I was very, very ambitious, and it did not work the way I wanted it to. So, but again, there is great value in a 1/1/21, like fresh start. Everything's everything's coming in new. Your balances are right. And then you keep your old data as well, especially if you're on desktop. You have your operating QBD file. You have your trust. It's there as long as you back up your files, and keep them safe, then you'll always have that data. So starting fresh isn't as scary as it sounds.
That's true.
David, if you're on 2016, until QuickBooks tells you you have to upgrade, you are not required to. There are a lot of features as you progress and get into the newer systems that either aren't supported or are glitchy or just maybe not even there in the older version, especially when you start getting into the bank sync, payroll, and the bill pay. So the biggest advantage is just some of those add-on features. But as far as like just the basic usage, there's no reason to upgrade until QuickBooks makes you.
We cut you off.
Yeah. How do you create new opening balance in the trust account once you close out this year in case of a discrepancy? That would be something that you would need to talk to your CPA about, mainly because we have to find a place for the discrepancy. Is it something that the agency wants to eat as an expense? Is it something that the agency actually has to cover some costs because of some discrepancies? That would be something I would refer out to your CPA. Debbie, if you can answer what it would take and what the process would be to go from per policy to per statement for setup.
Not just changing your setup in HawkSoft. So you want to be sure that you're going to set up, you want to check your company's payables box and then accordingly set up your accounts. There is a slight modification in how you make your invoices. Right now, you may be choosing an agency check to company or an agency suite to company when you're creating that invoice item. Instead, you're going to start to choose the carriers that you're going to be populating, and then the process of paying the payables. So there's a couple different steps. The setup is probably the minimal part. It's just an extra step to make sure that you process the payables. There are some help articles in the help system under your training guides that can talk about the different setups that are available under your trust accounting. So there's the trust accounting setup that will take you through the process of how to set up those payables. And then down here at your company payables per statement, how to process those payables. It will take you through what's nice is there's a little workflow that takes you through how to run the unpaid company payables report, how to make sure the balances are both in HawkSoft and QuickBooks, selecting the companies that you're going to pay on that statement, and then how to process the check, and then again, how to reconcile in QuickBooks. So the help article is pretty self-explanatory, and you can probably do it. The one thing I'd be sure is that you do it on a cutoff. Maybe at the end of the month you would start doing this at the first of the month, so that you don't have any lagging invoices or anything like that. If you have any questions, product support can definitely help you through that process. And there's also the articles on how to invoice. So the invoicing is probably simplest. You're just going to make sure that the premium payable box is checked and that you're using the carrier now when you're creating those invoices. So anything you see in the help system, you'll convert from per policy over to per statement when you're looking for those articles.
Yep, and keep in mind too, that process is going to be the same whether it's desktop or online. So even if you do decide that you want to go to online, that has no bearing on that process that Debbie has just reviewed. So one of the other questions we got, and it's interesting because this generally comes up every time I talk about this, regardless of the audience, bank feeds with the trust account. Sometimes it's going to match. Most of the times it's not. And for example, if you have National General, they're going to batch their payments. Auto owners, they're going to batch payments usually. So our department recommendation, our best practices, even though I know HUG doesn't do them, is that we do not sync the trust account. And there are several reasons for that. The first one is, it's one thing to bank sync a Starbucks expense or, your phone bill coming through. But when we're discussing fiduciary funds, so much care is needed. And the bank sync, if not done with care, can put things all over your ledger and you just not even know what happened. For example, one of the biggest discrepancies that we start seeing with the bank sync is when you're transferring agency bill earned commission. If you rely on the bank sync, it's treating it as a transfer, which more than likely it was at the bank. but your specific transaction within the ledger is you're expensing off of the trust account and you're depositing to the operating account. But if you're relying on your bank sync and you do transfer, then all of a sudden your bank balances may match, but your retained commissions are overstated and your income is understated. So there's a couple of different, and again, once you start getting into those, those batch payments, if you're not careful in making sure that you exclude those, all of a sudden you have something going, a big batch payment going somewhere on your ledger. It is not the worst thing I've ever seen to have a bank sync set up for trust, but it is one of the things that I'm actually quite adamant about, and you can ask all my staff, because like almost every meeting is like, don't bank sync the trust account, don't do it. But if you do, if you still want to do that, the way you handle that is when that batch comes in, you just simply select it and click on exclude, and that takes it off the bank sync. It does not remove it from the ledger, because those transactions should already be on your ledger since you exported them from HawkSoft, but you just exclude it off the bank sync, so it's just not matching up to anything. I'll step down off my soapbox at this time.
We've tried to do too much cleanup as a result of it.
Exactly.
So
yes.
okay.
Yes. All right. I think we have about 3 minutes left. Jennifer, we don't have any other questions sitting in our queue.
Yep, I think we're ready to wrap it up, and just remind everyone there will be a survey at the end, which we ask you to complete just to provide us with some feedback, and then we will get out an email within 24 hours with the recording for your viewing pleasure. And thank you, Debbie, thank you so much, and Crystal. I was a little worried that we were going to get no questions right at the beginning, and then they just started, piling on again. So thank you so much for your time and your expertise on this topic.
Our pleasure.
And I see, and I see that maybe Gabriella had some extra questions that are kind of coming through Debbie and Crystal. I wonder if you'd be able to just, I will provide some email contacts to you so you could get in touch with her, maybe just respond to those questions individually. How does that sound?
Yeah, we'll handle that offline. We'll need to see her screen for that.
Okay, very good. All right, thank you everybody for joining us, and we'll see you soon. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks everyone.